Okay. If you can hear me in the audience, please, you can drop emojis just so we know, or you can drop some messages on the chat for so that we can know that you can hear us, please. Let's just go on with today's program. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's program. If you're here because you want to know about electricity law. We'll be discussing the regulatory work of the Nigerian electricity and lead conversation. 5 gentlemen of repute. We have Mr. Tony Uyajiago, who is a managing partner at Hillbrook. The role Nigerian electricity. He was speaking on the statutory role of NEC-RC in electricity consumers, as well as the role of the RC addressing the maintenance of estimated. And also speaking is Mokhtar T. Tijani, who is General Manager of the Lagos Electricity Board, and he will be speaking on the evaluation of the state government's in boosting power sustainability amidst regulatory bottleneck under EPSRA. Also speaking is Mr. Ikem. Yes, legal licensing and compliance licensing irregular companies. Now at Infusion, a law firm built for edge economy and digital aid. We'll be speaking on recent trend in the electricity industry. So without wasting much of your time, we'll move on to the first one that will be moderated or that will be hosted by Tony Wajiago. We'll be speaking on the regulatory role of Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission in electricity consumers. Back to you, Mr. Tony.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Wajigo, as already introduced by Kimberly Samugana, even though he called my name wrongly. My name is Tony Nwaji Uko, and I'm the managing partner of Hubbridge Solicitors. I welcome all of you. I know it has been a long day. It's been a privilege you making our time to join us in this webinar. And I promise that it will be an informative one, and it will be one that you will not regret. I thank so much the panelists. With no particular order in preference, I will be thanking Mr. Kabir Adamu of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. I will also be thanking Engineer Mukhtar Tijani of the Lagos State Electricity Board. And I'll be thanking my very good friend, Mr. Stephen Woye of Woye Barristers and Solicitors. And I'll also be thanking Mr. Stephen Azubike of Infusion Lawyers. So without wasting much of the time, let us get down to the business of the day. I am scheduled to speak on the topic, the statutory roles of the Electricity Regulatory Commission in protecting the rights of consumers, as well as the role of NEC in addressing the menace of estimated billing. Permit me to be sharing some slides in this respect. I will start with the first topic, which is the statutory roles of NEC in protecting electricity consumers. As you all know, NEC is an acronym for Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and NEC is the regulator of the electricity industry. And the roles of NEC can be seen from the provisions of the extant law, which is the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005. And under the state law, particularly Section 32 of the Act, provides for the roles and the functions of NEC in regulating the industry. Now, pertaining to the role of NEC as it regards to electricity consumers, we have been able to narrow down 3 issues here, and which are: 1, the role of NEC in ensuring quality and maximized access of electricity to consumers, and then also the role of NEC in regulating electricity price margin to ensure fair pricing system to consumers, and as well as the duty of NEC in ensuring a safe and secure, reliable electricity to consumers. Now, I'll touch on those issues we have raised from bottom to the top. On the issue of safe and secure, reliable electricity, we will quite agree that unsecured electricity apparatus is very dangerous and can cause severe harms to lives and properties. I was going through a newspaper, that was PM News, which was reported sometime on the 1st of February 2022. And it projected a statistics from Nigeria Federal Fire Service, which identified electrical sparks as the major cause of fire outbreaks across the country. This statistics revealed that about 636 fire sparks were caused by electrical apparatus, and which has resulted in the loss of about 136 lives. Now, NEC, in trying to provide a solution to this issue, has promulgated a number of regulations pursuant to their powers under the provision of Section 96 to make regulations. But for the purpose of this discourse, we'll be looking at about 4 regulations, which are the Health and Safety Code, Grid Code, Distribution Code, and then the Metering Code. The Grid Code is a code that regulates the transmission network, how powers are being lifted from the transmission grid to the distribution network, while the Distribution Code is a regulation that regulates how powers are being lifted from the distribution network to the consumers. And the Metering Code regulates how the metering system apparatus are being connected by the DISCOs or the metering access provider. And the Health and Safety Code deals basically with the totality of everything that has to do with electricity connection. And these codes provided for health and safety standards that must be complied with by the distribution companies or the transmission companies or the generation companies in outsourcing this power generated from the generation to transmission and as it now gets to the consumers, so that this power will be safe for the consumers. Now, on the second issue, which is the price margin regulation, you quite agree with me that a lot of people might know, and some might not know, that one of the problems of electricity distribution is the market monopoly that was created under the extra pursuant to Section 8 during the unbundling of the Power Holding Company of Nigeria. 11 distribution companies came about, and they were given a coverage areas. We have the Eco Electricity Distribution Company, the Keja Electricity Distribution Company, the Jos Electricity Distribution Company, the Abuja Disco, the Ibadan Disco, the Benin Disco, the Kaduna Disco, the Kano Disco. Now, from this chart, you will notice that these people have different coverage areas. So you will have a situation, for instance, the place where you have the dark yellow spots, highlighting Yobe, Borno, Adamawa, Taraba. These areas are covered by Yola Distribution Company. And now the Yola Distribution Company does not have a right to meddle with connections in the, let me say, the purple zone, which is covered by Enugu distribution company. That it covers Enugu, Adamawa, Enugu, Anambra, Imo, Abia, and Ebonyi. So with this, it creates a kind of monopoly, and the acts and next, seeing that this will result in a form of exploitation for the consumers, has promulgated certain a tariff methodology that determines the pricing system of electricity in the industry. To that end, the tariff methodology that is actually operational within the industry is the MITO, which is the multi-year tariff order. And in promulgation of this tariff order under the Act, there are certain issues that NEC has to put into consideration, and which is that the tariff methodology must be one which is cost reflective or consumption cost reflective. And so what does this mean? It means that the tariff methodology will make sure that the consumers are actually paying for what they are consuming. Now, it also has to put into consideration a price methodology that must make sure that the licensees cover their cost of operation and also make reasonable profits on return of investment. And also a price margin which will avoid undue discrimination between consumer and consumer categories. Now, the last but not the least role of NEC in protecting electricity consumers is the issue of access and quality of electricity. Under Section 32 of the Act, NEC is to ensure and promote competition and private sector participation through issuance of licenses to electricity generation, transmission, and distribution companies in deserving circumstances. This purpose is to make sure that there are
more. You have less comments left.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Ms. Kimberly. Now, the electricity regulator must make sure that whatever they are doing in creating access has to go into issues of licensing. I wouldn't delve more into this issue. Why? Because one of the panelists will be delving into this issue. And also we have the issue of maximizing the use of power consumer assistance fund to ensure adequate supply of electricity. Under Section 83, it provides for a scheme that allows indigent persons to benefit from electricity subsidies, which was created by the federal government. Now, I will get into the issues of regulation that created access. Now, we have the connection and disconnection procedure for electricity services regulation. We have the customer service standards of performance for distribution companies, and then we have the customer complaint handling standards and procedures regulation. I will highlight some of the few features of those regulations. On the connection and disconnection of electricity services regulation, we have the consumer's right to connection. Under the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, the right of a consumer to connect is statutory, not just contractual. Now, notice before disconnection, you quite agree that there are incidences where the distribution companies disconnect consumers. Now, under this regulation, it provides that a consumer who is even in debt or has unpaid electricity bill has a grace period of 3 months and must receive statutory notices before the disconnection will be put in place. And then if the said consumer has applied under the Power Consumer Assistance Fund for consideration, now the distribution company is prohibited from disconnecting such a consumer. We now have the prohibition clauses under the same regulation. For instance, an apartment which is being used for life support, or a situation whereby a consumer is disputing his debt, the distribution company is prohibited from disconnecting such a consumer. And there are penalties for wrongful disconnection by the distribution company, which is payment of about 1,000 for residential apartments and commercial for 2,000, and I think industrial about 2,500. So these are the regulations that NEC has put in place to protect the electricity consumers. Now we go to issue of customer service standard performance for distribution companies. Now the supply interruption notification, which is that whenever they want to, there will be interruptions, the distribution companies are expected to notify the consumers. Then meter dispute resolution and voltage complaints are issues that must be resolved as expeditiously within a period of 15 days by the dispute. Now we have the customer complaint handling standards and procedure regulation. Under this, it provides that every distribution company must have a customer complaints unit, and the customer complaints unit deals with every complaint. For you to if you have any complaints, you must go and complain to the customer complaint unit of the discos. Now, where you are dissatisfied or whatever complaint you have has not been taken care of by the discos, then you have another right, which is take it now to NEC forums, which is the higher authority. The NEC forum is a forum that is independent of NEC, that is made up of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Chamber of Commerce, the technical experts, and the appointees of NEC. Now, when you are dissatisfied with whatever decision that was given by NEC forum, then you have the right to appeal to the NEC appeal unit. Now we'll delve into the second issue which I'm to discuss, which is the role of NEC in addressing the menace of estimated billing in Nigeria. The issue of estimated billing envisages a situation where distribution companies issue bills.
Sorry, very Tony, but 5 minutes has elapsed. But I don't know if we can an extra 2 minutes to wrap up.
No, 10 minutes.
And if anybody has any.
Okay, Ms. Kim, let me clarify. I'm taking 2 topics and which are 10 minutes. So I intend to take both of them at the same time.
Okay.
Yes. So
combining your sessions, right?
Yes, I'm taking the second issue now. So I'm delving into my second 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. So
if anyone has any questions, you can drop it.
Okay, if you have any questions pertaining to the first issue, the first topic that I've already delivered, you drop it. I will take all the questions at the same time. Now, the second topic that I'm meant to take is the role of NEC in addressing the menace of estimated billing. The issue of estimated billing envisages a situation where distribution companies issue bills to customers without a verifiable statistics of equating the cost to the usage of electricity by the consumer. On the 13th of January this year, a reporter of Nigerian Tribune newspaper described electricity billing in the following words: an arbitrary, non-conventional method of allocating monthly charges for unmetered customers without any valuation, acceptable yardstick, or scientific approach. The estimated billing system, in all honesty, can be described as broad-day robbery, and which makes a total mess of whatever milestone that NEC and the Ministry of Power has sought to achieve in the electricity industry. NEC, in all honesty, have made giant strides in curbing this menace. And I make bold to say this, as the tariff methodologies which have been adopted by NEC over the years in checkmating the exploitation of electricity consumers by discos is being sabotaged by electricity discos, as these tariffs are actually not reflected in the estimated bills issued by most of these discos to customers. We shall extract some of these regulations and schemes or policies designed by NEC to regulate the issue of estimated billing in Nigeria. We have the issue of meter reading. We have the regulation, the meter reading, billing, cash collection, and credit management for electricity supply regulation. We have the estimated billing methodology 2012. We have the credit advance payment metering implementation, which was done in 2013. We have the meter access provider regulation, and we have the National Mass Metering Program and the order on capping of estimated bills 2020. I will highlight some few features of this regulation. The meter reading, billing, cash collection, and credit management for electricity supply 2005. Some of the features is that it provided a mandate on analog metering billing system. This was actually the first regulation that envisaged that every consumer within the electricity industry must be metered, though analog. It also provided for a credit payment system whereby the consumer and the distribution company can come into a payment arrangements for offsetting electricity bills. And one of the shortfall of this regulation is that it didn't envisage smart metering and prepaid metering options, which brought about the estimated billing methodology of 2012. This billing system created a load factor parameter for estimated billing. This was the first methodology that created a parameter because the first regulation, which is the meter reading, billing, cash collection, and credit management for electricity supply, never factored in a billing methodology. Why? Why will I say this? Notwithstanding the fact that there was issue of analog metering billing system, not every consumer had this billing system. In fact, we had a situation whereby most of these meters are actually not functional. So the new methodology on estimated billing that was created in 2012 came to factor in that some of the consumers who are actually not metered by even the analog metering system can get their bills through a parameter, which is the load factor parameter. Now I'll explain what this means. What this means is that for the consumers to actually get their estimated billing, this particular regulation envisaged that the distribution companies have to meter the transformers and the feeders through which the electricity are coming to get to the consumers. So how do they go about generating this bill? They take reading from this transformer and then they distribute it to consumers who are connected to that particular transformer. That way, there is reduction of guesswork, and there's a reduction of guesswork and unconventional distribution of bills which are not regulated. Now, the failure of this particular regulation is that the discos who are meant to meter those transformers and the feeders did not meter most of them. And so it brings the question, how was the estimated billing methodology to be implemented, where most of the transformers which are lying on the streets are actually not metered as required under this regulation? Now, NEC, in a bid to bridge the metering gap, and then this the estimated billing methodology also factored in the fact that the advent of prepaid meters. Now, NEC, in a bid to bridge the metering gap, had to create what is called a CAPMI, Credit Advanced Payment Metering Implementation Option. Now, under this CAPMI, okay, let me explain first and foremost that the MITO, or the tariff regulation, which this CAPMI program is lying under, envisaged a situation whereby the discos are to bear the cost of metering, unlike what is operational now, where the cost of metering is now to be borne by the consumers. Now, under this CAPMI, the federal government, through NEC, arranged a system whereby the consumer will pay upfront for their meters and will be metered within 45 days. And then the cost of this meter, which originally ought to be borne by the distribution companies, will now be settled through a settlement system from the units which they now pay in the prepaid meters that they are using. Now, the problem with this program was the discos as well. Why? Because the program lasted for a period of about 3 years and only about 500,000 meters were deployed in a country where we had a metering gap of about 10 million. So, and most of the disco staffs were using it as a means of exploitation, whereby some consumers pay, but they don't get meter, and hence the program was actually cancelled. Now, in 2018, NEC, also in a bid to bridge the metering gap, brought about the Meter Access Provider Regulation of 2018. This created a new set of value chain in the Nigerian electricity supply industry and established a third-party financing mechanism, whereby these meter access providers now, who are new value chain operators, are expected for them to finance the supply of meters to customers. And this will now be paid through a 10 years amortization plan to offset the meter payments. This plan is still ongoing, though I will say that it failed totally, being that as of now, we are still facing the problem of financing of the meters, even from the state asset providers. Why? Because most of the people are still paying for the state meters. And this brought about the issue of the National Mass Metering Program. Now, being that the hope that NEC had on the map, the metering access providers to bridge this gap wasn't forthcoming, and hence they created an intervention by the CBN as a third-party financier of meter payments. Now, this envisages a situation whereby CBN will pay to the MAP and they will now supply. But unfortunately, these payments were still sabotaged. Why? Because we saw a situation whereby a lot of the meter access providers are not supplying the meters for which they have already collected the loans from the CBN. In fact, in the news, there are a lot of issues, a lot of court cases that are already ongoing as a result of this issue. Now, we'll get on the last issue, which is the order on the capping of the estimated billing 2020. Now, this is a very laudable regulation that NEC has actually put in place. This is the first regulation that I will say that have come to address the issue of estimated billing. By this particular regulation, now there are certain categories of consumers which there is a cap on the estimation of their billing system. What it means is that, for instance, in Langbasa feeder, you cannot bill them beyond a particular cap. Maybe in a particular area, maybe in Victoria Island or in particular area residential categories, you cannot bill them beyond that particular cap, no matter what. Why? Because NEC has come to the realization that actually there is no apparatus, or there is no factor, or there is no methodology to checkmate these issues, and hence they have brought in a way to get the discourse to result to issues of metering the customers through prepaid meters, and by putting up a cap on this. But I will surprise you that on recent we were handed an issue whereby we saw a prepaid or an estimated billing which was issued to a customer within Lagos here, and it will surprise you that the said customer the said billing system did not reflect the capping order that was issued by NEC. In conclusion, I would say that NEC has actually done quite a lot in issuing of regulations and the disposition to deal with the issue of the menace of estimated billing. But my challenge is implementation of this regulation.
Let's conclude.
Okay, yes, I'm concluding. Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank you.
So the problem is with the implementation of this regulation, and hence I've made certain recommendations, and which is NEC should decentralize electricity distribution supply chain for more disclosed to end the monopoly in the existing disclose. And NEC should also create a financial sanction mechanism against disclose to discourage issue of estimated billing. And NEC should also make the metering subsector of the industry robust enough and independent of the disclose. So thank you so much. I remain my humble self, Tony Nwajugo. I'll hand over to the moderator, Ms. King.
Thank you very much for that sound, Mr. Tony. Many of us has learned. I particularly have, especially a estimated bill. While I wait to get questions in the chat box and we session, I'll just go ahead with my question. So let me say I live in Langbasa. Let me use the same environment you gave us one of your examples. So I live in Langbasa, and my house we don't have a prepaid meter. We probably do in my streets estimated bills. I mentioned that most of these do not have a meter, so they charge the whole street 100, and then they split it among different houses on that street. To come and say you pay 10,000, that room you 20, or let's say everybody 10,000 in the house, so that we can contribute the total 100 that was estimated for my streets. Now, you would agree with me that there is an uneven there, because it's possible that appliances in my own house from the appliances in my neighbor, so what is regulation in that aspect? Everybody, because you're using estimate, everybody in the house is made to pay, even when they're not using same load or remember that you mentioned that for estimated bill, there's a transformer there's a prepaid meter on the transformer that sort of calculate load. So it's sort of load billing. My question is, how then do you calculate the load of a house and give them the rights, or what's the regulation there when everybody's given the same amounts to pay?
Thank you, Kim, for that question. Now, the issue of estimated billing is, I would describe it as a problem that we are trying as much as possible to see its end in this country. Now, a situation whereby two persons living in a particular street are receiving the same bill while they are not using the same load, electricity load. It's part of the problem of the industry. Now, as I stated earlier, the estimated billing tariff methodology of 2012 tried to streamline this issue by instructing the DISCOs for them to meter transformers and the feeders so that at least they can distribute. We can have a certain parameters whereby we can reduce this issue of estimated billing. So, but the DISCOs, most of the transformers in question were not actually metered. So now NEC came about a solution. I wouldn't say that it's quite a wonderful solution, but at least it's created a form of a solution, and which is a capping of the estimated billing. Now, I will share a screen. I'll share a screen of the NEC order on eco electricity distribution capping. For instance, in Lagos, if you're staying in Badagry, the cap that you are meant to receive in a month, your monthly energy cap should be 551. Now multiplied by the tariff, the operational tariff, that should be your cap. Now, if you are staying in Agbara, you are meant to be paying, your cap is 50 multiplied by the tariff. If the tariff is maybe 50 naira or 49 naira per kilowatt, multiply this by that is your cap. Now, by this cap, what it means is that if you are staying in the same apartment with me, you actually, or in the same neighborhood with me, and we are staying in the same area, we are meant to be paying the same thing, actually, by this particular regulation. So the NEC, the solution to it is the issue of prepaid meter, which is part of the drivers that NEC is pushing till this moment. Prepaid meter does not have a substitute. The regulations are merely trying to mitigate the problem of estimated billing. It has not solved it. So I will tell you that the issue of estimated billing can only be solved if all the consumers of electricity are properly metered. All the regulations that have been put by NEC has merely tried to reduce the suffering of the common man or the consumer of electricity. But it has not solved it entirely, but it's merely trying to reduce whatever exploitation that the consumers are facing in the hands of this consumer, in the hands of these DISCOs. So, Ms. Kim, would I say I've answered your question?
Yes. Yes, you have. Thank you so much, Mr. Tony. Right about now, we'll move on to the session. That will be hosted by Mr. Ikeme Tony. Sorry, Ikeme Funa. Oh God, I'm actually murdering your names. Sorry about that. Let me. So yeah, the second session will be handled by Mr. Ikeme Funa Stephen Wonye, going to be talking on the of EPSRA, which is the licensing of electricity distribution and generation companies in Nigeria. Floor.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Tony, thank you very much for putting this. I must really commend the industry. I was really excited and the topic and the purpose of the topic, we all would agree that electricity. So can you also allow me to share slides? I'm trying to do that, and I cannot really do that. Or if the host would help me put it up, something with the setting that preventing me from sharing the slides. So why the host is doing that? I want to say the issue of electricity is very tropical. It's tropical because all around Africa, it's become an important issue. In Africa, they're having this conversation. In Ghana, the conversation is going on. Here in Nigeria, we're also having the same conversation. It's the elections coming next year, and the politicians are out giving promises and what they intend to do in the energy sector. I'm still having challenges with putting them on. I don't know. Tony is saying I can't do that.
I can't do that also from my, I think Mr. Tony can help us.
Tony, do you want to see what is when they have your IT person? So, but why Tony is that, let me just quickly say that it makes the issue of electricity generation, distribution, and transmission a very tropical issue. No meaningful conversation about development. I mean, infrastructural development, industrialization, economic growth can be hard if we do not deal with supply. It's integral to the any country that has achieved industrialization, be that with the help of electricity, and that is effectively boosted their industries. Even from an agricultural perspective, you would also need electricity to do that. So in essence, I think that's pretty much the gist. I'm keeping this in mind. It puts us in the sure footing on how to deal with this. So I'm still having issues with my slide. I can't really make much progress without having the slide on. Is there a problem with the settings? And I can't share my slides. If you can help me share it from your end, I wouldn't mind, but I can't do it from there. So if you can on your own side and just help me, let me walk through the slide quickly. Hi, Tony, are you there?
Hello, Steve. So I'm sharing your screen at the moment. I think we are having a bit of difficulty getting you to share the screen. So
saying the host disabled slides sharing.
Okay, so
so if you can help me run the slides.
Okay. Hello.
Okay, thank you. Just go to the first slide quickly. Let's please. All right, okay. No, the introductory one. Thank you. So let me not waste further time. Essentially, I'll be dealing with the appraisal of the Electricity Power Reform Sector, Power Sector Reform Act with regards to licensing of electricity distribution and generation companies in Nigeria. So that leads me to the second slide about the state of the sector. Now, I said earlier on, any meaningful conversation about industrialization is hinged on sufficient power supply. At the moment, 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts in Nigeria. That's our average since January to September of 2002. In ideal sense, we need about 180,000 megawatts for us to talk about stable power supply in the country, meaning that we're far cry, from where we want to be. And we're not even making progress in terms of like an progress of 1, 2, 3 to get to that level. And we talk about the issue of transmission inefficiency. So you've generated, or how do you transmit? Then the occasional collapse of the national grid, which we hear all the time on the radio. Tony talked about the ineffective system, right? And then keeping that in mind, you talk about infrastructure, 7 generation companies, 11 distribution companies, 1 transmission company, 10 national integrated power projects, then a handful of independent power producers around the country. Are these really sufficient to more or less deal with the power needs of a country of over 200 million people? I don't think so. We talk about the obsolete of our national grid system that over the last couple of months it has experienced collapse at intervals, right? Now, keeping this sector in mind, keeping what we talked about in terms of the sector, it lays the foundation for how to solve the problem. We need more investment in the sector. Now, for investors to come in and put money, they need to understand what the structure is. What is the legal framework? How do I really navigate this environment, right? And that leads me to the next slide that talks about the legal framework. Now, let me put the next slide, please. The legal framework governs the Nigerian electricity sector. It's a constitutional issue. The Assembly and the status of assemblies have competence in this area, meaning that the state can drive the electricity projects and the federal can drive theirs under the structure. But however, we have a national grid system, which is the overarching platform for energy generation and distribution in the country. If you look at the paragraphs 13 and 14 of part 2 of the second schedule, it deals with that extensively. Then that brings us to the Act itself. The Act also created the NERC, which is the regulatory commission responsible, right? Then under that NERC regulation or Act, we now have several regulations that come into play. The Licensing Act, the Metering Act, the Access Protection Act, the Safety Regulations, some of which Tony talked about in the slide. Then we need to understand that the sector has a regulatory hierarchy. The president, who happens to be the chief executive officer of the country, sits at the very top. Then you have the minister of power coming right after him. He directs the policy formulation in the country as far as the energy sector is concerned. And then that also leads to the level of the commission. So at the commission level, it's very much of the action takes place because the law creating the commission gives the commission a lot of power on the issue of regulating the industry, regulating the sector, and ensuring that standards are kept, right? And then you have the various states. Lagos State is leading in this slide. Lagos State had its own commission, its own, what they call the Lagos Embedded Power Commission, and the power council that sees to affairs of power generation at the state level. If you look at the next slide is pretty much a simple slide. It tells you the powers of the commission itself. So it's created by Section 31. It has powers to regulate the industry. I've talked about that. Several licenses that come into play. The generation license, which could be an on-grid electricity generation license. Then talk about the transmission license, system operation license, distribution license, and the license. So these are pretty much the types of licenses you can get in the electricity sector. So if you want to be at the generation spectrum of things, you find yourself there. At the transmission or at the distribution level, you can also find yourself there. Then that is the next slide, and which is the most important slide. Now, let me say this. Applying for obtaining a license are pretty much 2 procedures. It's the direct procedure by way of a merger acquisition, and I will explain. Direct procedure to license, either a transmission license, generation license, or a distribution license might be. You go to the commission, you submit your application pursuant to Section 70 of it, and then the application for license, right? The position elaborates. You prepare it in the written form as stipulated in the schedule, right? Address to the chairman, your written documents, the identity. If it's an individual, I would imagine identity card, your passport to suffice. If it's a company, your incorporation document will come into play. Then the nature and scope of the operation, sufficient information as to your operational base and scope to enable the commission to evaluate what you are trying to do. Now, if it's a corporate entity, you need to close certain things. If there's anybody that, any of your shareholder that owns more than 10%, it's a disclosure requirement. At level, you lift the veil. The commission wants to know who are the controlling mind. So if you are holding 9.5%, 9.9% of the shares, you are good. You won't disclose. But the moment you hit a 10% threshold, there's a disclosure requirement. And then all these documents are put together and you submit to the commission at its headquarters, right? So this is the next slide. Now, I think, this is very important. Within 30 days of receiving your application, the commission would acknowledge it. They will let you know that they've received it, and then you'd have to now publish that application in the national daily circulating within the locality. So let's say an investor is based in, for instance, let's say Delta State or Edo State. You want to generate power. You need to publish a newspaper in that location. If you are based in Enugu State, you do same. If you are based in Anambra, even if you are based in Kano, you have to publish in the newspaper in that location. Then a newspaper with a national spread, right? Now, after you've done this publication, the room is for people to know that you want to create such a company, a distribution company, you apply for a license. It gives the opportunity for feedback as to your suitability to handle the project. After that, you now give room for 21 days. Right? 21 days is for this objection NRC to evaluate your. Now, the NRC has to assess it. They can either approve or refuse. Now, if they approve, notified. If they refuse, you're also notified. But beyond that, there are several considerations. An arbitrary approval. The license must more or less come under certain terms and conditions if you're getting an approval, right? So, and the overarching philosophy of granting a license is that they want to ensure whoever is giving this license has the ability, the technical know-how, the wherewithal, to run a distribution company, a generation company, electricity needs, right? So if you look at what I said, the NIRC's primary focus is assessing and allocation is to balance the interests of the market participants and the protection of the Nigerian consumers, right? With respect to price, quality, consistency. So doing the quality quantitative consideration here in the supply or generation of power. I'll move to the next slide quickly. So once this is done, as reached, you have a 6 month period for all this to take place. From the time you submit the application to the notification with 2 days, to the 21 for objection, to the evaluation period, it's a period of 6 months maximum. As the commission deems it fit, it will come up with a result within 4 months, but not more. Now, when this is done, right, the key here is that you will be granted, you've met the requirements in terms of showing your financial strength, of what you can do, in terms of what you cannot do, right? Now, the next aspect of this is the indirect acquisition. This is when identify.
Before you go on to the next, you have just left.
Okay, thank you. I'll quickly, because the other parts are pretty much things that are relatable to. Now, for the indirect, right, is by way of a measure. So as an investor, you go by brownfield investment. You identify a given company, a generation company, a distribution company, and you say, I want to participate. You discuss with existing shareholders. Now, most of these companies are either publicly listed or privately owned companies, right? You discuss with the existing shareholders, you reach a shareholders agreement, a share purchase agreement is signed, thereby they transfer their shares. Now, that is another way to get a control of a distribution company. And probably maybe the easiest way, if you don't want to go through the regulatory scrutiny of meeting that, waiting for 6 months, doing an assessment, what are you not. Now, when you do that, remember, requirement of 10% will still come into play. If you look at the slides, Tony, please move to the next slide. Let me quickly point out something. I talked about a scenario where, this is a different one. If you hit that percent requirement, you must disclose. So the NRC says, the commission says that you go by intention through M&A, acquire the shares, you've gotten to 9% control. Others have 3%, 2%, 4%. It makes you the majority share of the company. It does not consign the NRC because you've not gotten to 10%. Take more than 10%, 20%, the visible and the substantial owners of that company, then there's a requirement you even have to apply a fresh license. So the NRC will grant you a license as someone that took control of an existing company, or they may say, we do not think that you can match effective company. You need to come afresh and then we'll evaluate your application and grant you your license. But in all of this, something is important. The way of indirect acquisition of the M&A route is important to do your due diligence. The company, know the assets holding, know the liability that are holding, be sure of what you are buying. Not really because, oh, the rule says I can afford you jump into an investment, at the end of the day, you see that the company is your company. I cannot identify a company in particular, but the rule is whoever your solicitor is in this transaction, the rule of thumb is conduct a due diligence exercise. Once you are done with your fundamentals in terms of the finances and you're happy with what you're buying, you proceed. So having said that, I move to the next point. It's a quick one. Cancel. If you do not comply with a 10th license, the NARC has a statutory license. So in as it can be granted, the guarantor of the power or the license can also take that. And in doing that, if you breach any of the conditions, you apply on a fraudulent misrepresentation, there's willful contravention of the grounds for cancellation. And I itemize each of those grounds. Please, the next slide, let me quickly wrap up so that you make one or two comments. Next one talks about enforcement. Yes, for defaulting licensees, this is where it becomes very interesting. We leave this for the regulator. We have someone from the commission to us. He will be in a better position to do this. But from a theoretical point of view, the NRC has far to caution, enforce the terms of your license. And before they do that, no doubt, there are considerations for fair. It says a notice must be served, you must be given an opportunity to make a representation before they take issue an order. And the order be very constrictive or very expansive. Constrictive in the sense of limiting or expansive in terms of giving you more obligations to discharge. The idea is that you have a right over your license. So before the end, the commission will suspend your license or cancel it as the case may, there's room for you to for you to be heard and take place. This my final point, and I hand over to Kim.
There's
the
no
license
final.
is a transfer.
We're giving you more than enough.
All right, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the slides are self-explanatory, so I'll leave the rest. By way of answering your question, I will make intervention quickly. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think Collins Okwe is if he can get after this webinar. So is that possible for people in the comment section to get the slides?
Yes, my available, and I believe same for other presenters.
Okay. Just want to go through. Okay, so we have some questions that I happen to be seeing now. Just read them. I think this question is actually for Mr. Tony.
Oh.
Can we take Mr. Tony's question now?
Yeah, please.
Before. Okay, great. Mr. Olu is asking IKDC over meter. Mr. Tony, are now us bill of 100,000 plus when using it, we do not use more than a month. Question is directed to Mr. Tony.
Sorry, I
think he's saying that. Yeah, I think he's saying that he was 100,000 naira, whereas he knows that he does than 20K a month. They gave him a bill of 8,000 naira.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kim, for that question. Sorry, what's the name of the person that asked the question again?
Olufemi Bisuga.
Okay. Mr. Olufemi or Miss, I don't know, anyone it is. The NEC has promulgated certain regulations to help in ventilating your grievances when it comes to issues of estimated billing, and which is one, the procedure is this. If you are given an estimated billing, first and foremost, what you have to look at is what is the current law or the current regulation which regulates estimated billing, and which is the capping of estimated billing of 2000 and I think 2018 years. That's the regulation that governs, sorry, 2020, the order on capping of estimated bills of 2020. So first and foremost, what you have to do is check your bill. Look at what area are you on? What is the cap for your usage? what is the cap for your usage. You will look through the regulation. In fact, after this webinar, we'll be sending out some of these resources so that the participants will have access to these things. And you can actually go through and check if maybe under the order of NEC, your cap is 420 for your cap. And if you multiply it by the present billing system, which is maybe about 46 or 50, and you are arriving at about 14,000 every month energy cap. So what you do is this: you put up an email, or you can even visit the DISCO. You put up an email and make a complaint stipulating in very clear terms that, look, I got so bill by NEC order. I'm not expected to get so bill. Please review this and this. Now, after you have made this, they have about 15 days for them to address this issue. If they don't, then you have the right to take it to the NEC forum. And as this thing is being done, remember that under the meter reading, billing, cash collection, and credit management for electricity supply regulation of 2005, which has not been repealed, you are not meant to be disconnected. You are not meant to be disconnected while this procedure is going through. You are not meant to be disconnected while this procedure is going through. So the NEC forum will have to hear your complaint. If your complaint has not been properly addressed by the DISCO, they will hear your complaints, invite them for them to come and give justification why they have to give you a billing which is beyond what is stipulated by the regulators. And after that, they will deliver a ruling which is enforceable against the DISCO. So I believe I've answered this particular question. Thank you, Ms. Kim. And thank you,
You're welcome.
Ms. Olufemi, or Ms.
Femi.
Olufemi, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so if you have any further question, Mr. Olufemi, you could just drop the answers or questions on the chat box. So I'm going to move on to the next question, then I would move on to the next section. Mr. Collins Okwe is, I'm just on what he's saying. Basically, his meter had fault, and he said fault of his, but he was electricity, but will recharge from time to time. And the guys came to disconnect his electricity, and now they issued a bill 150,000, and it's called loss of revenue. Asking, is this legal? Is it legal for them to be 150,000 naira for revenue for those times that I was enjoying lights?
Thank you, Ms. Kim, for the question. So I'll get down to this. This issue is almost related to the same issue which was asked. It's almost related in the sense that, okay, the loss of revenue, which is normally issued by DISCOs, is actually justified in the sense that they are estimating the loss of you. Okay, how do they come about this loss of revenue? They look at your consumption as of the time you have been paying during the meter, and now they have to do what's an average mathematics to get what you ought to have paid for the period that you have consumed electricity without it being without it coming from the prepaid meter. So what you have to do in this circumstance is, if you are given a loss of revenue calculation, what you do is you can contest it. You go and make a complaint at this thing. Why? Because at the point, once your meter stop reading, what it means is that you are back to the estimated billing category automatically. Now, but you also know that there are also penalties for trying to change the DISCOs. And that's part of the things that they capitalize on when they issue some of this loss of revenue. So what you need to do is, whenever your meter is bad, you raise a formal complaint to them, so that you have a record, so that it wouldn't get into the issue of, okay, you're actually trying to exploit them. No, but you have a record that you made a complaint that your meter is bad. And for your issue, since you are now within estimated billing category, you have to check which area you fall into, because actually not every consumer falls into is protected under this estimated capping regulation. Yes, not every consumer. We have, I think, residential 2, residential 1, the lifeline tariff. Yes, they are covered by this particular residential, one residential, to which I believe most of the consumers in Nigeria fall within this category. So if you are within this category, just for you to get a particular order that covers your particular area and look and know, okay, this is my car, do the mathematics. And when you get there, you tell them, okay, since from this social time that I stopped recharging, that the discos we are calculating by this, why not we revert to the capping order and do the mathematics? So whatever you arrive at, that will be your bill for the period that you have not used that. And if they still refuse on that, you will take up your complaint to the NEC forum, which is covering that particular area. I forgot to say that every distribution company has NEC forum. In fact, some distribution company has even 2 and 3 NEC forums to sort out this kind of issues. So if you are not, if your problem were not sorted out by the distribution company, you can take it up with the NEC forum covering that distribution company. Thank you so much.
Thank you for answering those questions. We answered the other questions in the chat after the next session. So we'll move on to the next session headed by Mr. Kabri Mugarkawa, and he's going to be talking about licensing, regulatory tool to curb excess of electricity distribution and companies in Nigeria. So, Mr. Adamu.
Okay. Much for the opportunity to everybody listening to us. My voice is very clear. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for this workshop. Yes, I'm speaking about licensing, which is a similar to what the previous speaker about, but when the topic was given to me, I was wondering if just a repetition of this, but the organization there is a nuance that can be between this topic and that topic. So I have the advantage of now speak to you and some of the things that were said presenters. Topic to not waste any time or not to meander is like a regulatory tool to of electricity distribution and companies. Licensing, I must start by saying that it's one of the most regulatory of the commission. And you see that by the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, you see numerous references are made to the licensing. So let's look at the next slide. Let's see the presentation. From the outline presentation, you will start with that is the beginning, the legislative authority. That is the foundational regulatory powers that the commissioner has, the power supply industry, and then the regulatory mandate, licensing, that is introduction, regulatory instrument for licensing, terms and conditions of licensing, and then conclusion. Essentially, I will try to make it simple. It's a bit complex the way we come. If it is just one type of license, it's something that is very long and it will take time. So therefore, I will try as possible to make it intellectually accessible so that people will understand. Already the laws are there. What is important is to know when they say somebody is having a distribution license, what actually mean? Somebody is having a license, what actually does mean? So this is number. So I think the legislative authority, as we are all aware, the act, the principle that regulates the power supply industry is the Electric Act of 2005, which under Section 1 of the Act created the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission as the technical and regulatory supervisor of the Nigerian power supply. So NEC by Section 31 was established to regulate all aspects of electricity business in Nigeria. And technically, it is called the Nigerian supply industry. Now, after Section 31, Section 30 of the Act set out objects of the Commission. When you look at Section 32, you see it is bifurcated in two different. Section 32, subsection 1, the object of the Commission, while Section 32, subsection 2, talks about the functions of the Commission, what the needs to do to achieve those objectives that are highlighted in subsection 1. There is only one thing that is usually that I tell people, it is something like share coincidence. We look at Section 32, subsection 1, about the 7 objects of the Commission. Section 32, section 2 talks about 7 for Commission, and we have 7 commissions. If each of the commissioners activity that is required completely. So there is a quiz one day they tell you that where the 3 sevens in that, so you can be able to make reference to this. One is Section 34, and the 2 are all in Section 2. So I may not go into details about the different functions. Commission has enough function. There's the one that is most important in this presentation, or that is really relevant to this presentation, is Section 32, subsection 2, paragraph D, which says that the Commission has power to license generation, transmission, system operation, distribution, and trading. These are what are called regulated activities in motion. There are other aspects of electricity business that attract permits, certification, authorizations, and approvals. But when you hear anything from the Commission saying that somebody licensed or somebody has license, so that license is only restricted to those activities mentioned: generation, transmission, system operation, distribution, and trading. And you will see them if you go to Section 64 of the Act. Section 64 of the Act makes provision and make provisions, conditions, and requirements for generation license. Section 65 talks about transmission license. Section 66 talks about system operation, and Section 67 talks about distribution. Then Section 68 talks about trading, and Section 69, that is just about the transfer, assignment, and all that things. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we are talking about Section 2, subsection 2, paragraph D, which talks about the powers of the Commission to license anybody who is doing generation, and so on and so on. There are some restrictions, or there are some exemptions. It's not all type of generation. Everybody that has a generator in the house is not required to file an application for a license. So it has to be within a particular threshold, which will come to look at that. So please, next slide, please. So these are the mandates of the Commission. So we will not go into this. Okay. So I think here what we're talking about is the licensing. One scholar, I think the former chairman of the Commission, Dr. Sam Amadi, said that licensing, looking at the Act, constitutes 70% job of the regulator. When you look at all the market participants, to be a market participant, you have to be licensed by the Commission. And in licensing you have to meet certain requirements, and then post-licensing requirements actually follow suit. And that is why you will see that all the big players in the market are licensed by the Commission. When we talk about the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, is licensed by the Commission. When we talk about the only transmission company in Nigeria that we have, is equally licensed by the, and then the other generator and so on and so on. So this tells you that licensing is anybody who is operating without a license is a big issue and is violating the provision of the Act and is sanctionable under the Electric Power Sector Reform. So now, well, the question is not just about how to get license, so I'm not going to delve into that. I think previous speaker has already spoken about. The question is about how the commission try to use licensing to curb excesses of generation and distribution company. By way of saying it, I don't think maybe most people connection or relationship with the companies. A lot of people don't even know the companies, where are they, what do they do, because they don't usually have contact with customers. Usually customers, they only know about discos, they know about, if you are in Lagos, you know about Echo or Ikeja. If you are in Ibadan, about IBEDC. If you are in Abuja, you know about AEDC. You may not know that maybe the one you are generating is coming from Azura Power West Africa. 1 megawatt is coming from maybe Niger Delta Power Holding Company of Nigeria, which they have like 10 power plant, or the IPPs we have, or the other GenCos we have like Transcorp Power, so on and so on. People don't even know and how this power are generated. They are more concerned about this discourse, how they operate. So the first thing that we need to know, I think I'm not really following the slide because most of these things are a bit like clear. So maybe after the presentation, you can share the slides to the people. I'm just trying to make it very simple. So for distribution companies, I think let me just start with distribution company. How does NEC actually regulate or have the access of distribution company? One of the main function of a regulator is to strike a balance, a delicate balance between the interests of the investor and then the consumers. So the commission was not only to come and say let's get power to people with payment or at a cost that not actually that is not reflective of the investment that was put in place from the beginning. So a scholar once said that promising power without cost, it deliver cost without power. And one Indian said there is no cost that is higher than no cost to pay power. So what it means that it comes to empire, make an empire to protect the interests of all the stakeholders in place, to balance of all stakeholders in place. If you a license, a distribution company has a license of the commission, has an application under section 31, 2D, under section 62, and under section 67. Get a terms and condition of their license under section 71. And the license they have has terms and has 10. So if you are a disco, for example, Abuja Distribution Company, that Abuja Distribution Company has is not perpetual license. Their license was issued in 2013. That is during the privatization. So they have like 10 years initial tenure, and they have 5 years. So if you have all this, like they have 15 years from 2013. So, and then there are numerous, section 63 of the Act says that a licensee has to comply with regulatory broad spectrum of technical requirement, broad spectrum of health and safety issues. So some of the key things that are in the terms and conditions or in the provision of the electric power sector reform that control these players. Number one, which is a very important section, and which almost everybody is aware when we go to court, or a lot of people, a section that gives a lot of licensee head is section I think 71 subsection X or A that talks about no. It does, another person cannot come and give a license if he satisfied the requirement for getting a license. So although, and in practice, those are monopolies. When you look at the literature of market power and so on and so on the world, usually they are sort of monopoly because of their business. They have to do investment, they have to construct lines, they have to construct wells. So the regulator does not come and give everybody license. So there will be crisscrossing of lines and so on. That will be actually post security and health and safety threats to the lives and property of people. So, but the question is that the license you have is not exclusive. Another person in a desirable circumstance can come and apply and get a license as long as your license and its license are not given to operate or to exist in the same place and using facility. So one of the conditions in the NEC IED regulations, you see that for the commission to give you independent distribution network license to operate like a small disco with a disco, okay, one of the conditions is that that place requires that service, or the service that they are getting is not sufficient. Maybe some asset that needs 24 hours supply and the disco there cannot give them. Okay, and then they will write an undertaking. They are not going to use the property or the facility of the existing or the host disco and that and so on and so on. So number one, if you are a licensee, number one, your license does not give you, you don't have a license in perpetuity, and then number two, you don't have an exclusive license. Your license you have, commission can come, and there are a number of applications, a number of cases that we have, especially in Lagos State. When you look at the secretariat, around secretariat area, they came and then they obtained a license, distribution license, whereby some state facilities are being given electricity from these independent power companies. So this at least is trying to tell, okay, you must play, you must try to maximize or to optimize your operations in order not to allow other people to come and get licenses to do what you're not supposed to do, because Nigerians need services. So this issue of exclusivity is a very important tool in the hand of the commission that covers the excesses, as if you, the way you put it, of some of the operators. Another thing is that one of the conditions in the terms and conditions of the license is that licensees are required to provide periodic reports. It is in the act and it is in the terms and conditions of the license. So information must be submitted to the regulator in the form and manner that is required by the regulator. And these information are not only required a matter of course, no, all these information are reviewed. If it is a technical information, the technical people will look at it. If it is commercial information, the commercial expert will look at it. So this is another arm, another leg that help the commission actually to regulate or to the excess of this. Another thing, one of the conditions for you to get a renewal of your license or to get a tenure extension of your license is the proof that the initial, in operating the initial license, you did not violate any of the terms and conditions of your license or the Electric Power Reform Act, and that you are submitting all your in the form and manner directed by the commission and so on and so on. So if you need any regulatory approval, because Section 73 of the Act says that you can be term or condition of your license. That is, if you have two customers, you are supplying two customers, you can come to the commission and say you want to submit 4 or 5 more customers. But you cannot get this if you are not complying with the rules and regulations of the commission. So any regulatory approval that a licensee needs to get from the regulator, he must have a proof of good regulatory standing assessed by the commission before that application is granted. We have a lot of cases of licensees come to the commission and their applications either are rejected or they are asked to go back and actually do something, rectify something, or prove something before their approval is granted. Another powers the regulator has, or another way the regulator try to control this is by inspections. And the regulator has power under the Electric Power Sector Reform Act to send inspectors. This could be in-house staff, bodies to go and inspect the books, to the sites, the operational panoply of the licensee in question. So There are on-spot assessments. Some of these visits are on-spot. Some of these visits are scheduled. Some of these visits are unscheduled visit. So the licensee at every point in time is required to comply with all the regulations and to respond to the demands and to respond to any inquiry that the regulator will ask him to do. So these are equally some of the ways the commission give the commission try to curb, try to control, try to regulate the operations of the distribution company. And perhaps most importantly, is section 74, when you look at section 74. So if you want to understand this properly, I always tell people that if you read section 62, from section 62 up to section 75, if you just look at this one, you will understand a lot about the licensing powers of the commission. When you look at section 74, is a section that talks about cancellation of the licenses. So while section 73 talks about amendment of the license, section 72 talks about the renewal of the license, section 71 talks about the terms of the license, and section 70 talks about the requirements that somebody needs to comply, or the application procedure requirement, whereby it says that for the commission to give you a license, it has to be certified that you're going to comply with the laws, regulations. And then number two, the second ambit of it is that the grant of that license is in the public interest. So this is another wide discretion given to the commission. In some cases, the commission will look, okay.
Mr. Apologies, sincere apologies, but your time is up. So I'll just give you 1 minute to wrap up, and then we can move on to the next session. Thank you.
All right. So I'm just trying to say the last thing. One of the two conditions that the commission look before they give anybody license. Number one is that, okay, this is somebody that will comply with the rules, regulations of the commission. And then number two, it is in the public interest to give this person a license. So these are very, very critical, very important consideration that the commission actually bear in mind in giving a decision. Just like somebody said, when you look at the act, it says that every decision of the commission must be must contain the reason behind this decision. So if the commission approves any application, this is the reason why this application is granted. If the commission rejects any application, the commission will say this application is rejected based on the following reason. So I will stop here. As I said earlier, this is a very lengthy topic, and as I said, I have not even gotten the chance to explain to our listeners the different types of licenses, so that people will understand when they say, for example, on-grid electricity, what does that mean? When they say off-grid, what does that mean? When they say embedded generation, what does that mean? All this, they have different requirements and they have different ramification and application. But maybe some other time we will have opportunity to explore some of this in greater detail. But one question and answer, if there are other questions that are pertinent to this, we will respond to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adamu, for that sound presentation. I'm sure that we cannot obviously touch on everything today. It's impossible, but these are conversations that are ongoing and will continue to have. I'm sure that Mr. Tony has other webinars like this in the works, and that we can discuss more about these topics. So we'll just move on to the next one, and then we'll take all of the questions. I see some questions in the chat box. We'll take all of the questions at once at the end of the last session. So please keep the questions coming. We'll take all of them. I'll make sure that all of your questions are answered before we leave here today. Taking the next session is Engineer Mokhtar C. Tijani. He'll be talking about the evaluation of the state government's role in boosting power sustainability amidst regulatory bottlenecks under EPSRA. I hope I got that right. So over to you, Engineer Mokhtar Tijani.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Just thanks for the introduction. Thanks to everybody on the call. I'll be speaking on the topic I just mentioned, which is, can everyone hear me? I'm not even sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can see you.
Okay. Evaluation of the state government's role in boosting power and sustainability amidst regulatory bottleneck under the EPSRA. This is not my presentation. I'm not sure whose presentation is still showing, but I unfortunately couldn't make one, and I was hoping I would have been on a bit earlier. I might have to run right after I speak, but forgive me, please. So I'll start off by just giving a brief background on what EPSRA has done and how it's affecting the states. The EPSRA was passed in 2005, as we all know, and the eventual handover to the privatized companies was in 2013, 2014. Now, prior to that, I can speak a bit more authoritatively about what the Lagos State government has done. I'm aware of what a few other states have also done. In 2011, Lagos State government, due to regulatory bottlenecks, had to essentially build 5 independent power plants to power our own facilities. They were captive plants. We had intentions of improving power supply, not just for our facilities, but also neighboring locations. We were unable to, so we could only power our facilities. Even if I take it further back than that, in 2006, 2005, the former governor of Lagos State then built a power plant with an intention of improving power to Lagos. But the regulatory bottlenecks also impeded him. He had to supply that power to the national grid. Now, fast forward to essentially where we are now. Lagos State is currently receiving under 1 gigawatt of power from the national grid through the 2 DISCOs operating in the franchise region of Lagos State. It's grossly insufficient for the state. From conservative audits, it's been shown that Lagos State will require over 10 gigawatts of power to meet its energy demands for 25 plus million residents. In addition to the under 1 gigawatt we get from the grid, over the years, Lagos State, from data we have, has imported over 5 gigawatts of diesel generators into the state. So we are getting more power from diesel than the grid. And there's dispersed distributed solar PV here and there in Lagos State also, which would also be competing with the volume we're getting from the grid. So clearly, to us, it's not really it's more of a regulatory bottleneck for us than a financial issue or a technical issue, because people will find a way to get electricity supplied to their houses and businesses in Lagos, clearly. So now the state government role, I'll go back again to the EPSRA or even the Constitution of Nigeria in 1999. There's something called an exclusive list. There's something called a concurrent list. Power generation and transmission was under the exclusive legislative list for the federal government, according to the 1999 Constitution. Power distribution, on the other hand, was on the concurrent list, which means the federal government and the state governments can legislate on distribution. A lot of states, not sure they're even aware of that. If they are aware, they haven't explored that enough. Lagos State has done over the past couple of years is we've put together a policy document through the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. I can probably share with the moderator later a soft copy to distribute to all participants. Now, what this policy document seeks to do is to establish a Lagos electricity market outside of the existing national grid to complement grid. What this will do for the grid, allow the power that is currently being distributed to Lagos, probably share to other nations that require it, and also allow Lagos State to augment the shortfall of over 10 gigawatts that we have today. The policy document has gone through the process. It's been passed by the Executive Council, and a law has been drafted that we are working on with the Lagos State House of Assembly. Luckily for us, there's another document that has just passed through the Federal National Assembly, through the Senate. It's also gone to the House of Representatives. And what they have done is they sent it to all the 36 states awaiting a 2/3 majority before they pass the law. What this law speaks, which I could probably share again with the moderator, is allowing the state government participate fully in electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. So what this would do is, at least I can speak for Lagos State. Those states also I'm aware of quite some giant strides they have made in getting a policy document on the electricity sector passed. Now, what this would do is allow states the fully participative and private sector in improving electricity generation, electricity supply in the entire value chain to the residents of the state. We are having various discussions with donors and the World Bank and other developmental financial institutions on how we leverage private sector capital and know-how in expanding these electricity assets all around Lagos State. Those are an advanced stages of this also. But we're working very closely with the legislators, both at the state and the federal government, so that we are able to get any regulatory bottlenecks out of our way in order to essentially unlock the mental and technical abilities required to allow the proliferation of electricity all around the state. I think that's really all I have. I'll try to get straight to the point. A lot of guys have talked a lot about the licensing and other legal issues relating. I heard of the meters and the meter asset regulations. A gentleman from NRC also spoke very well about all the rules of all the commissioners and the one that pertains to licensing, etc. So I look forward to anything I can handle. I'm so sorry. I probably have another 10, 15 minutes. I have to get on the road. I probably join on my phone anyway, but Amanda's interactive as right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tijani, for that very short and concise presentation. So I guess we're moving on to the next session, which would be headed by Mr. Stephen Azubi. He'll be talking on recent trends in the electricity industry. And then after Mr. Azubike finishes, we will check out the questions and, wrap up with this. Over to you, Mr. Stephen.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you to all the speakers and our participants. It's been a long day. I hope to quickly current trends in the electricity industry. A lot has been happening. I mean, every day in the news, we see a whole lot coming up in the space. Permit me to quickly talk about transformation in the I will also, in addition, look at the Constitution Amendment Bill and the Electricity Bill 22 with highlights. Please, can we get on to the next slide? The next slide, please. Okay. So there has been several calls for digital transformation in the power sector. We took special notice of what the CEO of Ifel Energy said recently in during the Power and Water Nigerian Conference and Exhibition of 2022. He made a very solemn call for the digital transformation of the industry. And what is digital transformation of digital tools in the energy sector? It has a whole lot of advantages. It's improved processes and the productivity to deliver the required output. Of course, we look at issue of designing and implementation of policies, monitoring, and all of that. We see we cannot but consider the enormous advantages of employing digital tools in the scheme of things. Before we look at where we are currently in Nigeria as far as digital transformation is concerned, perhaps it's important that we also even know examples of what these digital tools may be. Of course, I give credit to the International Energy Agency for putting together a very comprehensive paperwork to guide this particular conversation. So I will quickly run through some examples of the kind of digital tools that the energy sector need in our world today and in our country for purposes of the transformation we are talking about. The next slide, Tony. So for instance, we have things like the big data, databases, data that helps with, or when you consider that a whole lot of information are available data in the entire energy space within the country, within the state and given locations. And then if you have powerful tools that analyzes this data, it will help a whole lot in what we are talking about. Soon, I'm going to cite certain examples of how this can work. We also have the non-intrusive load monitoring, digital communication and networking tools, smartphones and apps, virtual buildings and digital twin cities, GIS mapping and remote sensing, virtual audits, digital certification and compliance, natural language processing, and web search analytics. I will share a few examples. Let's get to the next slide. When we talk about databases and big data, we have an example, for instance, in India. In India, there's what we call the India Energy Dashboards. It's an open source portal. It takes care of, it collects data and I mean, makes report on the country's electricity on usage of which is actually focused in this webinar. And there are other tools that are listed on there. We have the Building Energy Efficiency Program dashboard and the national. One interesting thing about this particular one is that it stores the online database that displays the number of LED lights by region in real time. I mean, I know we are not there yet to have a perfect understanding kind of facility, but that's just show you an example of where countries are headed to. In Australia, we saw 2020, they launched the Distributed Energy Register, which provides a database of information about distributed energy resource. Other advanced countries like China and US are definitely left out. As we go, we'll see they are also deploying technology tools in the energy sector. The next slide. When we talk about the non-intrusive load monitoring, again in India, we have what we call digital and data collection analytic tool called the National Energy End Use Monitoring Dashboard to obtain up-to-date information on appliance energy usage. In every home and offices, these are things that burn energy. And if you have a very good idea on how the amount of energy that these appliances use, you'll be helped as to how the kind of information that will put on the table for policymakers. We also cited an example in the UK. In 2018, UK had invested around $6 million in what they call the Smart Meter Enabled Terminal Efficiency Rating Innovation Program. And that what this does basically is to help in developing and monitoring and evaluating smart meter technologies applied again to household appliances, like I just mentioned. We also, I don't hope to run through all of these tools because of time factor, but of course, this slide will be available for the participants. Can I get to the next slide, Tony? We have also digital communication networking. There is something interesting about these particularly. Again, an example in the UK, the government launched what it called Simple Energy Address. It's an online platform advising citizens on how to reduce their energy consumption and electricity bills. That is something that Nigerians will really need. It guides them towards optimal energy efficiency brands. All recommendations, as we saw, are based on the country standards, houses, and energy. I can assure that in this country, we are still not there at this level because we are still battling with the issue of sufficiency electricity. Of course, we have also how smartphones and apps can assist. But the next slide, in India again, there's an example we saw in India. They have a mobile app which allows consumers to assess the efficiency of energy. It will advise them, we'll talk about making some monetary savings, again tied to appliances. Very important, another digital tool which I'm interested in is the one they call the virtual buildings and digital twin app, digital twin city. We found that in use in Singapore. Tony, please can you get to the next slide? So we can see what Singapore technology, for instance, in Brazil, for instance, okay, the slide is up. In Singapore, we understand that the government of Singapore at a larger scale has recently compared what is called a full-scale digital model, including 3-star replicas for the entire city. What does it do for them? It helps them to focus, to help city people. We have agencies that are into fiscal planning and all of that. In Singapore, when you have data on how energy these areas. Then in Brazil is even where I found something very exciting because of my research topic. You understand that there is a local government that has also initiated this kind of technology. And we understand that over 5,000 sensors were network communicating with status in real time. Now, in Nigeria, we are still talking about how state governments, the states get involved, just like our good friend just mentioned a few minutes ago. But in Brazil, local governments are even championing, and it can only tell you how far we are still lagging behind in Nigeria.
Apologies,
So
Mr. Steve.
Yeah, so
your time is actually up. So let's do it.
No. So just to wrap up, right? I just mentioned that we are still battling with sufficiency, availability of light, of power, as a country. It shows how far we are lagging behind, and how much we have ahead of us to even achieve within the energy sector as a whole. So, Kimberly, I will graciously ask that you give me another 2 minutes. Let me mention one or two things about the amendments that has come to play. I'm glad to hear that even Lagos State government has passed relevant laws and taking control of taking advantage of the concern amendment number 33 that was passed by the National Assembly earlier in March this year. We also have the legislative bill which the Senate has passed. Information we have is that it is for constitution by the House of Representatives. The most important thing, I've highlighted the very interesting points in these bills, which is the federal government is finally conceding that the whole idea of the national grid system, which ordinarily also appear to translate to national grid, as it were, that grid factor, GRED, is not being allowed to take center stage, as actors and other private entities are being given a larger room to come and play in the sector. It is quite commendable. What we are asking for is that there should be other states like Lagos, Edo State, and the rest of them should take this opportunity that is being presented and see how far we can do in improving the entire energy sector in the country. So thank you very much. I hope I've been able to make a few contributions to this very important topic that we have on our desk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. I really appreciate your keeping to your promise of minutes. Right about now, we'll head straight to the question and answer segment. I will start by asking Mr. Wonye Arizechukwu's question, who is directing the question to Mr. Stephen Wonye. I'm guessing that is your sibling or someone related to you, because you have
that's my younger brother. Please go.
So he's saying, he's asking why a country like Nigeria with over 200 million in population is still using about 4,000 megawatts of electricity, while a country like Egypt is using about 59,000 megawatts of electricity. Why is this the solution? Why is this the situation, and what should be done? So I'll just give you 2 minutes to answer that so we can keep the time.
All right, okay. Arinze, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question. He's actually an electrical engineer studying in so I'm really excited that he asked this question. But to answer your question without further delays, pretty much everything we're talking about, the system is not effective. A national grid system that centralizes generation creates room for one inefficiencies, right? So even though you try to have, let's say, an hydro dam system here, gas generating plants here, or solar panel on the other aspects, you still deal with variables, things that are outside your control, right? So that's a major challenge. So in terms of generation, I think we need to, one, think of more reliable means of generating, and not only generating, then we need to diversify. So increase our gas generation, maybe pretty much every state down south, especially in the United States, to rely on gas. That might just make sense. Then up north, we look at solar panel. In the west, we can devise hydro system to power or generate energy, right? And over time, the more players we allow, either at the local government level, at the community level, or at the state level to come into the sector, the more we're able to show up our energy generation. And when we get to 50,000, 60,000, the idea is another 280,000. Remember, I see my first slide. When we get to even 60,000 megawatts, then we can talk about efficiency in transmission. But until then, let's allow and encourage more investment in the sector. And that's probably one of the solutions we can have to the generation threshold we have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, that are
Oh yeah, Stephen, oh yeah.
I think there are like 2 Stevens on the panels panelists, so it's interesting. I'll move on to this question by is asking, most during the switch from estimator bit to prepaid meter, there's always a debt on the prepaid meter, which is deducted upon recharge of the prepaid meter. What can be done, or can that be properly addressed to avoid debts on the prepaid meter? And I think this question by Ruth is something many Lagosians and Nigerians have heard of instances where things happen, where you move into an apartment, the landlord is telling you to, or the electricity people are to pay for something you did not use, you have no knowledge about. So I am answer to this question. I'm not sure who in the panel would this question.
Hello, thank you, Ms. King. I think at this point I will be asking my good friend and brother, Mr. Kabir um, of the Nigeria Electricity Commission. So maybe I'd like on this issue. Mr. Kabir, I don't know whether you're still with us. Okay. I think his video is off. I think maybe
His video is having.
yes, maybe
You
his
can
video is having-
proceed.
Okay, let me take the question. Now, the incidents whereby bills are being loaded on the prepaid meter is this. Let me explain. Every house or every consumer has what is called a billing address. Every consumer has what is called a billing address under the metering code. Now, if the billing address in question has over the time, during the time we're using analog meter system, has accumulated certain bill, what the discos do is at the point that you are now requesting for estimated billing, as a result of the pressure from NEC and a lot of as a result of the pressure from NEC asking them for them to bridge the metering gap, what they do is they issue prepaid meters to those persons, but they will now factor in the bill which has already been accumulated by the building or by the consumer. Now brings us the issue of whether the consumer is the person who is actually occupying the apartment at that point, or whether the consumer was the person who probably has vacated the apartment. Now, I wouldn't want to delve into the technicality of who is a consumer and who is a customer. It's more of a legal issue. But what you do in that kind of circumstance, whereby a bill is factored into your prepaid meter, which you recently acquired from a disco, what you do is this: you approach the distribution company who had, because actually meters are being deployed through the distribution company. So you approach the distribution company and you raise this issue that you notice that there is so and so bill on your meter. And why is it so? Now, we'll handle some of these issues. And what they will do at that instances, they will ask you, when did you move into the apartment? If the apartment is your building, then it is taken that you actually consumed the bill which was loaded into the estimated into the prepaid meter. But if it's a new building and it's a new billing address and it's a new meter, there is no reason whatsoever where there should be an accumulated log of bill on the said prepaid meter. So, and if that's the case, we'll make available the slides on how complex mechanisms should be activated by consumers in getting these issues resolved. So thank you. I hope I've answered this question.
Thank you, Mr. Tony. I appreciate the answer to the question, and I hope that answers your question, Ruth. I move on to the next, which is from Anonymous. He's saying, I was in my house yesterday and someone walked into my house, introduced herself as an employee of Ikeja Electricity, and said my meter software will soon expire and asked me to pay for another meter. Is this legal?
Okay. At this point, I think Mr. Adamu is with us. Mr. Kabiru.
Hello?
Okay, I see.
Hello? Yes, can you hear
Can
me?
hear you. I hear you
Yes,
now.
I'm here. Thank you so much.
Hello, Mr. Kabiru. Yes.
What's
Yes. I think a question. Ms. Kim, please, can you repeat the question for him, please?
Okay. So someone in the audience is asking, or she's saying that, or he or she's saying that I was in my house yesterday and someone walked into my house, introduced herself as an employee of Ikeja Electric, and she said my meter software will soon expire and asked me to pay for another meter. Is this legal?
No, that is outrightly not correct. So if you have any problem with your meter or the meter has any issue, the commission has an order decommissioning of meters that are obsolete or meters that are not functioning. So somebody cannot just walk into a house and just tell you without any clear evidence of complying with the regulatory directives of the government on how to decommission or how to check a meter. And there are different ways by which a customer can get a new meter. If the meter is faulty, not as a result of the fault of the customer, it is the responsibility of the distribution company to even replace the meter. The new regulation on the National Mass Metering Program regulation that combines that framework and MAP talks about the only exception is where a customer willfully damages the meter. That's where the customer will now pay for and get buy for the new meter. So in summary, if somebody comes to you and you are not, don't oblige, and you can write to the disco and get proper explanation on what is happening. And you can get a new meter either through MAP or through National Mass Metering Program and other ways that are clearly stated in the National Mass Metering Framework and the regulation.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Mr. Adamu. We have one last question from Mary or Maz Kogbe. And person is asking, or the
I
person
would like
is
to take the
saying,
question from Max.
okay, person is saying this. Is, in my opinion, this erroneous talk about the discos automatically becoming the owner of electrical installation, e.g., transformers installed by individual or communities. Is there a legal basis for this? And is this not an unlawful, maybe the person wanted to spell,
Exploration of
yeah, property contrary.
exploration of personal property.
Yeah, please go ahead
for
the answer.
Yes, I'm particularly very interested in this question by Max Itombe, my good friend. You see, this issue of individuals and communities buying transformers, for example, and then discos claim ownership is one thing I find extremely unnatural. I am not aware, and we have our good friend from the NEC, who is also, perhaps, I'm not aware as a date that there is any that permits that. Far back as sometime in 2016, I recall the Minister of Power, the learned Mr. Babatunde Raji, condemning that idea that individuals and communities should gain transformers in the first place. This is something, the full responsibility of the discos. And to make it more disturbing, earlier in the year, the Association of Discos released a statement where they tried to justify the reason, take ownership. In fact, to them, they will make you get a letter of donation to successfully they deny you ownership by these things. And they said their main reason for that is to ensure public safety. And you begin to wonder, what does that mean? You have to take ownership of something to secure it. In fact, one of them, while speaking in the interview, went as far as saying that you cannot to guarantee security and over an item that does not belong to you, thereby appearing to be abdicating their role as they are expected to play. Have the responsibility to secure the. They don't need to own it, but they can live up to that responsibility. And worse still, the minister has it clear that it's a responsibility to ensure that the transformers are where they should be. So, Max, to date, there is no legal justification, and it is indeed, in my very reasonable, a violation of the constitutional right to own property. But of course, you know, out of desperation, individuals in certain communities, they need the power. They have to do what they must do just to happen. That is the situation we have. So I'll be happy to hear from the regulators if this issue have come to their table and how they are reacting to it. I'll be very happy to hear. But I'm just speaking from a standpoint of a legal perspective.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, hello.
So, essentially, what my brother has already spoken, the understanding or the position of the regulator on this. You know, usually investment in the networks of the discourse, the transmission is what they call in economic terms sunk investment, whereby once you put something there, then it becomes the property or the asset of the owner of that particular asset or facility in question. So there is a regulation. Let me just say this one clear. There is a regulation on investment in the networks, which when you just go to our website, you'll see it, where individuals or communities or investors, anybody that wants to come and buy transformer or want to buy anything and put in the network or to re-energize a particular dilapidated infrastructure, there is, but you have to follow that law, you have to follow that regulation. You have to agree with the DISCO, you have to inform, you have to engage the DISCO on the standards, on the quality and the nature of that infrastructure that you want to bring, because the DISCO is essentially the one that is accountable and responsible to the regulator, not some faceless or people that you cannot actually pinpoint or you cannot actually get. So, and then one key important role of the regulator is that the regulator ensures that only efficient costs are passed to consumers. So if anybody can just come and bring anything and put it on the discourse network, then there is a process of tariff revenue requirement whereby the discourse, they have to recover their investment, and this investment and the assets there are things that they must be efficient so that they cannot just come and bring anything, the quality not actually standard and so on and so on. So for anybody to get into, also anybody to do investment in network or to buy or purchase anything has to engage the distribution licensee in accordance with that regulation on investment in the network, which is that if anybody does anything outside that regulation, then it usually becomes very difficult even for the regulator to get you back your money that you invested.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adamu. We have two more questions. Please keep them coming. We'll be running up very soon. We have two questions before we round up. One says, I need an explanation on the difference between gigawatts and megawatts. I'm assuming that is what you mean. The second one is, according to our electric law, who has the responsibility to repair transformers? So who will be taking these questions?
I think from a mathematical standpoint, gigawatts is bigger than megawatts, right? If I'm correct. So you need about 1,000 megawatts to get 1 gigawatt from a mathematical standpoint. But I stand to be corrected.
Stevie, you're absolutely right. Yes.
Okay, so the next question is, who has the responsibility to repair transformers?
Actually, Mr. Kabir, can you take it?
Yes. Yes. I think it's just basically part of the question, the answer I just given. Every distribution infrastructure, the DISCO owns and has the responsibility to buy it. And that is why a lot of you will be hearing that the DISCOs are not doing the sufficient or required investments to improve on the services that they're supposed to do. So the transformers, everything, transformers and the substations, distribution substations, these are all properties and responsibility of DISCOs to purchase and to repair them.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Adamu, for that answer. Without any other questions, I I guess we'll be running up now. Mr. Tony, I don't know if you can give us some closing remark, and then I'll do the vote of thanks, and then we can close this up.
Okay, so let me once again thank all the participants, and my special thanks to the panelists. I thank Mr. Stephen Moye, who with the time difference in the United States of America had to squeeze us into his tight schedule. I also have to thank my very good brother, Mr. Kabir Adamu of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. I know it's been a very hectic day, but in fact, at the time you were even, I think you were on the road, rushing back to join the meeting. And so I thank you so much for making out time to contribute to this informative seminar. And I also thank my friend and my brother, Stephen Azubike, who is a partner at Infusion Lawyers, the tech lawyers. Yes, I thank you so much. That's the Stephen Legal Digest that we all hear about. That's him live and direct. And it took a lot for him to be in this panel. And I also thank my very good friend, who I will also call a senior brother, that's the Lagos State Electricity Board General Manager, who, as a result of his meeting, which is for 6 o'clock today, had to jet out. I thank him for gracing the occasion. And I will not forget to give my sincere gratitude to our moderator, Ms. Kim Samugana, who will not hesitate to cut you short if you are going beyond the stipulation of your time.
It was only optional. It was not intended.
Thank you so much. And I thank all the participants. I thank you. In fact, I cannot keep calling. There are a lot of people who graced this occasion. I thank you all, and I wish that some other time we will still have to do this again. It is all for the better growth of electricity in Nigeria. I thank you, and it was a pleasure having you at this webinar. And I will provide for you the webinar materials later. I believe it will be of great importance to you all. So thank you, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, everybody. We did not take your questions. Sorry, it's because you didn't drop them. If you dropped them, I would have asked. So again, everybody, hopefully they have another session like this where we'll discuss about things that concern us as Nigerians and even us as Lagosians. Sorry, I'm biased too because I live in Lagos. Thank you, everybody. See you another time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you, King.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye.